What if the world we trust, gravity, time, the solidness of walls, is only as real as a paused video or a flickering screen? What if the rules we live by are not laws of nature, but lines of code? There are moments when reality slips, not in dreams, but in daylight, before witnesses, under blue sky and camera lens. A soldier disappears from a Manila guard post and reappears in Mexico City. A quiet town in New Mexico forgets gravity for 17 minutes. A woman lives the same Tuesday 47 times. These are not sci-fi screenplays. They are events recorded in police logs, scientific notes, and classified reports. Events that whisper of a deeper truth, that the world we know might not be what it seems. In a time where technology can render whole worlds on a screen, where AI can simulate a voice, and quantum physics admits the observer may shape reality, a strange possibility has emerged from the fringe into conversation. That we are not inhabitants of a universe, but players in a system, a simulation. This is not to say we are in a video game, nor that some grand machine watches our every move. No, this idea is subtler and more haunting. It suggests that our reality, as consistent and textured as it seems, might occasionally fail. That behind the veil of trees and sky, something else exists: structure, code, scaffolding. These so-called glitches in reality aren't just curiosities. They follow patterns. They behave like software bugs. They have duration, radius, symmetry, repetition. Witnesses describe them not as hallucinations, but as programming errors. Some feel time loop. Others watch people duplicate or fade away entirely, not in violence, but as if deleted. And perhaps most strangely, the world moves on. The records adjust. Memory falters. The glitch is absorbed like a ripple in code that corrects itself. Could it be that the laws of nature are not laws at all, but instructions? Could time be a sequence, space a render, gravity a parameter? And if so, what does that make us? This series explores 10 documented glitches, each with physical evidence, consistent testimony, or video proof. From teleportations that ignore geography to floating islands that cast shadows in the clouds. From duplicated people with synchronized minds to towns reset like computer checkpoints. They are eerie, not because they're impossible, but because they feel familiar, like artifacts from a system we almost understand. We are not here to argue that we live in a simulation. Instead, we ask, what if reality behaves as if it is? What if the universe has memory leaks, rendering errors, and debug modes? What if consciousness, your thoughts, this moment, is the interface? Each part of this journey will begin with a strange event. Then, like peeling back wallpaper to find blueprints underneath, we'll ask what it might mean, culturally, scientifically, humanly. Because the point is not to prove. It is to wonder. What happens when gravity forgets? When a town resets? When a man walks through marble? When you meet your own duplicate? And what if these aren't mistakes, but hints? Hints that the world is more editable, more fragile, and more meaningful than we think. Let's begin with a soldier who stepped through space. The morning was ordinary, humid, still. October 3rd, 1593. A Spanish soldier named Gil Perez stood guard at the governor's palace in Manila, the weight of his musket familiar, the stone courtyard beneath his feet solid. And then something flickered. He blinked. When he opened his eyes, the air had changed. The scent of the sea was replaced by dust. The architecture was wrong. The language on the street signs unfamiliar. He was no longer in the Philippines. He was in Mexico City, 9,000 miles away. Witnesses claimed he appeared out of nowhere. In the crowded Plaza Mayor, dozens of people saw it. A man in a foreign uniform, dazed but standing upright. He looked around, confused but alert, as if waking from a vivid dream still in progress. His uniform matched that of the Manila Guard. His weapon was a Filipino issue. And his story? Unbelievable. He said he'd been transported instantly from his guard post to Mexico. He didn't know how, only that he felt reality stutter. It wasn't a dream or a delusion. He described the moment of transition as though he had stepped through a doorway that hung in the air itself. For a breathless instant, he claimed he could see both cities, Manila and Mexico, as if they were rooms in the same building, separated not by distance, but by file path. The authorities, understandably, arrested him. They suspected desertion, madness, perhaps witchcraft. But then something stranger happened. When the next Spanish ship from the Philippines finally arrived, months later, it confirmed every detail Gil had provided. The governor of Manila had indeed been assassinated, exactly as he described. Witnesses in Manila confirmed he had vanished on duty that very same morning. The dates matched to the hour. Even the Spanish Inquisition, known for its harsh skepticism, investigated and found no signs of fraud. Their notes, now buried in Vatican archives, describe the event as a supernatural transportation inconsistent with natural law. Modern researchers have analyzed the path between Manila and Mexico City and noted something eerie. The two cities form a near-perfect great circle arc across the Earth's surface, as if following a programmatic shortcut, a direct command. Copy, Gil Perez. Paste, Mexico City. Plaza Mayor. Timestamp continuous. What's most unnerving isn't just the distance, it's the precision. His clothing, weapon, even the dirt on his boots arrived intact. His thoughts were unbroken. It was as though reality had lifted him like a file and dropped him elsewhere without rebooting. Is this what happens when the simulation forgets to obey its own rules? If our universe is a simulation, then events like this, rare, documented, unexplainable, are not miracles. They are exceptions, errors, moments when the system loses track of which assets belong where. And in those flickers we glimpse a terrifying beauty, that the fabric of the world is not fixed. It's flexible, editable. A man transported across oceans not by ship, but by glitch. What else might the world be able to move or rewrite? Taos, New Mexico. August 4th, 1969. A sleepy morning in a desert town known more for its art and adobe walls than for scientific anomalies. Maria Santos was hanging laundry behind her house. A wet sheet slipped from her hands, and instead of falling, it floated. Upward. She froze. The cloth twisted slowly in midair like it had been caught in an invisible stream. And then the dog bowl lifted. A rake. Her shoes. The tree leaves shimmered in place. A silence fell over the air, not of peace, but of awe. Gravity had stopped. For the next 17 minutes, Taos became something out of dream logic. Water refused to fall. People bounced like astronauts. Children leapt rooftops. Cars had to be tied down. Birds flew erratically, confused by their weightless wings. And it wasn't hearsay. Hundreds witnessed it. Footage exists, filmed by a local television crew who happened to be in town for a documentary. In the background of an interview, papers drift lazily like feathers. The cameraman's voice is caught on tape. What the hell is happening? Physicist Dr. Richard Morrison, in town by coincidence, conducted field tests on the spot. His conclusion? Gravity hadn't disappeared entirely. It had dropped to about 15% of its normal force, just enough to suspend disbelief and everything else. The most unsettling part? The boundary. A perfect circle 2 miles wide centered on the town plaza. Inside, the laws of physics wobbled. Outside, normalcy. Reality, it seemed, had drawn a line. At 11:04 a.m., Everything snapped back, instantly. A deluge of falling flower pots, bicycles, and stunned residents. Glass shattered. Limbs were broken. The sky remained clear, as if nothing had happened. But it had, and it left a scar. Government agents arrived within hours. Much of the documentation was locked away. Official statements ranged from optical illusion to seismic interference. But photographs and independent film reels tell another story. You can't argue with floating shadows and drifting laundry. If gravity, that constant we trust to hold us, can pause even for 17 minutes, then what else is optional? Was it a breakdown in universal constants? A localized rewrite of the simulation's physics engine? Or was it a test, a debug mode flipping the switch off and on again? Think of it, the universe acting not as a grand mechanism, but as software with adjustable parameters. A toggleable checkbox beside gravity. On. What are we left with then? Not certainty, but suspicion. That the physical world is not foundational, but provisional. That reality is not obeyed, but rendered. And if gravity can forget itself even for a moment, what else might be waiting to drift? March 15, 2011. A Tuesday. Jennifer Kumar awoke to the buzz of her alarm at 6:23 a.m., just like always. Coffee, traffic, work, meetings, a routine day. Until it happened again, and again, and again. 47 times Jennifer lived March 15th. Each sunrise identical, each song on the radio unchanging. The world remained on loop, but she remembered. At first, she thought she was dreaming, a vivid sense of déjà vu that wouldn't quit. But by the fourth iteration, something broke through. Awareness. She began noticing patterns. A bird always hitting the same window at 9:06. A co-worker dropping their pen during a meeting. An accident on Highway 12, right on cue. It was real, and she was alone in it. As the days reset, Jennifer began testing the loop. She called the police before an accident occurred, describing it down to the minute. When it happened just as she predicted, eyebrows were raised. She wasn't crazy. Something was wrong with time. By loop 12, she stopped reacting and started experimenting. She learned Italian, memorized poetry, studied advanced mathematics, read hundreds of books. Each morning, she woke up with her progress intact, a consciousness unanchored in a world repeating itself. By loop 23, she convinced researchers at the local university that she was experiencing a temporal anomaly. One physicist, Dr. Sarah Chen, helped her conduct controlled experiments to detect changes in reality. During the loop 31, Jennifer found something even more startling. She could bend the loop. With intense concentration, she could slow time in certain segments. A lunch break could last hours, while the clock ticked only minutes. And then, in loop 45, she met someone else. Frank Rodriguez, an elderly man, had been living the same Tuesday for 3 loops. They found each other by pattern, by recognition, by the weariness of memory. Together, they discovered that the loop was expanding. More people were becoming trapped in Tuesday. They devised a sequence of actions, trivial-seeming things. Folding a napkin a certain way, walking a precise path, saying specific words aloud in a particular place. On the 47th loop, they performed the sequence together. The next morning, Jennifer awoke, and the calendar read March 16th. The loop had ended, but the memories remained. Dr. Chen's report would later describe it not as an illusion or hallucination, but a localized temporal anomaly. Her conclusion? That time might function not as a flowing river, but as iterable code. That memory is not just storage, but evidence of an unsaved draft repeating itself until resolved. What is a day, if not a file? Repeatable, editable, rerunnable until the right outcome is achieved. Jennifer's story is less about being trapped in time and more about mastering it, gaining control of her own timeline while the rest of the world repeated itself like cached data. And perhaps the greatest question, how many of us have felt the repetition, the feeling that life loops, not just in schedule, but in rhythm? What if it's not imagination? What if time, like code, sometimes gets stuck, and consciousness is the only process that continues running? Millbrook, Illinois, June 12, 2003. Librarian Rebecca Martinez was working the reference desk when she glanced out the window and saw herself walking past. Same face, same clothes, same purposeful stride. She blinked and rushed outside, thinking it must be a trick of the glass, a reflection, a doppelganger. But what she found inside the building made her stop cold. There, in the stacks, she was already shelving books, quietly, methodically. Her duplicate turned, nodded, and continued working. At first, the town thought it was coincidence, impersonation, even a prank. But soon, dozens of people were reporting it. An insurance agent saw himself in line at the coffee shop. A teenager saw her double riding her bike down the next street over. A nurse watched herself check vitals in a hospital room she wasn't assigned to. These weren't similar-looking strangers. These were exact replicas. Same voice, same memories, same injuries, same DNA. And always they behaved normally, moving in synchronized routines that matched the originals with uncanny precision. But something was off. The duplicates seemed to operate on a delay, exactly 4.7 seconds behind. Physicist Dr. Michael Ross was brought in to study the phenomenon. His conclusion? The duplicates weren't projections or illusions. They were made of real matter, casting shadows, interacting with the environment, living. But video analysis showed a chilling pattern. Each duplicate appeared in the exact location where its original had been 24 hours earlier. It was as if reality was replaying cached data, like a corrupted rendering process displaying old versions of people alongside their current selves. Attempts to separate the duplicate from its original by more than 500 meters caused both to suffer disorientation, memory errors, confusion, loss of equilibrium. Like mirrored tabs in a browser glitching when moved too far apart. The event lasted for 6 days. Then, just as suddenly as they arrived, the duplicates vanished, not dramatically, but like static fading from a screen. Witnesses described them dissolving into pixelated fragments, flickering once, and gone. All records of the event were sealed. Some residents were relocated. Others were told they had experienced mass hysteria. But photographs, thermal images, and biometric scans still exist. Millbrook is not alone. Similar duplication events, always lasting 6 days, have been reported across other small towns, always with synchronization, always with fading ends. What if memory isn't just stored in the brain, but in space itself? What if reality doesn't delete the past, but overwrites it, imperfectly, leaving echoes, rendering people twice, like a program caught in its own buffer? The Millbrook incident invites a new kind of fear. Not that we could be replaced, but that we might already have been. That reality, like a badly coded game, sometimes lags and duplicates us mid-process. Who then are you? And if you met yourself, would you recognize which version was original? September 23, 1997. Captain David Chen was piloting Flight 447 from Seattle to Los Angeles. 30,000 feet above the Earth, the sky was calm, visibility perfect. And then it appeared. A massive island suspended in the air, not clouds, not an illusion. Land, solid, detailed, trees, roads, buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, people walking, hovering motionless above the clouds. The flight crew stared in silence. Passengers rushed to windows. Some began filming. Chen radioed air traffic control, but radar showed nothing. Through binoculars, Chen could make out what looked like a medieval village, complete with cultivated fields, rooftops, livestock. As the plane approached, the impossible became unmistakable. This floating landmass cast a shadow across the cloud bank beneath. A real object, three-dimensional, with depth and weight. Even stranger, the people on the island saw the plane. Passengers reported that figures pointed upward. Some gathered in groups. One appeared to wave. Air traffic control, stunned by the pilot's transmission, scrambled 2 F-16s to investigate. But by the time the jets reached the coordinates, the island was gone. Vanished. The only evidence? Dozens of photographs, hours of witness testimony, and something hidden in the plane's instruments. During the event, Flight 447's navigation systems began to glitch. Instruments showed impossible data, as if the plane was simultaneously at multiple altitudes and locations. The interference lasted exactly as long as the floating island remained in sight. When it disappeared, the readings returned to normal. But something had shifted. The passengers knew what they saw. Video footage, later analyzed, showed no signs of manipulation. Experts confirmed that the images, a large landmass floating in open air, were genuine. But how? The island showed signs of an ecosystem, its own weather patterns, fog around the edges, birds flying overhead. It wasn't a mirage, and it wasn't alone. Leaked reports suggest other sightings by military and commercial pilots, all eerily similar. Brief appearances, detailed terrain, human figures, and always a sudden, clean disappearance, like a scene being removed from a digital render. Some theorists proposed an atmospheric mirage. Others spoke of interdimensional overlap. But perhaps the truth is simpler and stranger. What if the sky is not empty, but selectively visible? What if entire environments exist above us, hidden not by clouds, but by settings? The floating island feels like a loaded asset in a simulation, one not meant to render in that moment, revealed by mistake. To see a world complete with people drift into view and then vanish like a test environment is to confront a disturbing possibility, that even landscapes are not fixed, but deployed, that places may not be discovered, only revealed, and that what we call reality might be as conditional as a loading screen. Grand Central Terminal, New York City. December 14th, 2005. The morning crowd surged like a tide. Briefcases, announcements, footsteps echoing under vaulted ceilings. And then, silence. In the middle of the main concourse, a man named John Stevenson calmly walked forward and passed through a marble pillar. Not around it, not behind it, through it. Dozens of people saw it happen. Security cameras captured every frame. Officer Maria Rodriguez, standing just 10 feet away, watched in disbelief as Stevenson's torso vanished into the solid stone. His legs followed, then his head. Then, on the far side, he emerged, whole, unharmed, confused, but breathing. She ran to him. He was solid to the touch, not transparent, not an illusion, just wrong. Footage showed no cuts, no edits, one continuous shot. Stevenson walks straight into the pillar and comes out the other side, as if the laws of matter had simply stepped aside to let him through. When questioned, Stevenson described the experience like moving through thick gelatin. Inside the marble, he could see its inner structure, steel supports, wiring, rebar, all transparent, like a medical scan. He claimed part of him still felt inside the pillar for days afterward, a kind of spiritual phantom limb, as though a piece of his presence had become entangled in stone. Medical tests showed no abnormalities. Blood work, normal. X-rays, normal. Brain scans, normal. But electromagnetic readings? Not normal. Devices picked up strange energy fields around him for hours after the event. Fluctuations with no known source. As experts dug deeper, they found something even more bizarre. That particular marble column had been acting oddly for weeks. Maintenance crews reported strange softness, like the stone was warm or pliable. Sensors detected erratic electromagnetic pulses emanating from inside the pillar, as if something underneath the visible surface had lost stability. After the incident, access to the area was quietly restricted. The footage was sealed. But witnesses and the footage itself told a different story. What does it mean when solid matter, the stuff we trust to stand still, to stay whole, becomes passable, not broken, not destroyed, just disregarded? To walk through marble is not just a defiance of physics, it's a suggestion. That matter is optional. That solidity is a visual effect. That the world may be built not from atoms, but from rendered boundaries. And sometimes those boundaries glitch. The phase walk wasn't just a man passing through stone. It was reality, forgetting that walls are supposed to be impassable. What if the world only feels solid? Because that's how it's meant to appear. And what happens when that setting gets turned off? Cedar Falls, Iowa, November 8, 2012. It began in silence, the middle of the night, the hour when most of the town slept, unaware that reality was quietly rolling back. At 3:17 a.m., night shift workers at the local hospital noticed something strange. A wing of the building, one that had been demolished the previous afternoon, was suddenly back. Not under construction, not halfway rebuilt, fully restored. By sunrise, it wasn't just the hospital. Throughout Cedar Falls, everything had reverted to its state from exactly 24 hours earlier. Graffiti disappeared, fresh paint jobs reversed, construction sites refilled with dirt, trash reappeared in cans it had been taken from. Residents woke to find furniture rearranged, back to where it had been the day before. Some thought they were dreaming, others assumed they were losing their minds. Until the evidence mounted. A local real estate agent, Sarah Mitchell, had painted her house green on the 7th. On the 8th, it was blue again, down to the precise weathering patterns on the wood. Paint analysis showed it wasn't simply reapplied. It had been molecularly reconstructed, aged and faded, just as it had been yesterday. City officials soon realized the phenomenon wasn't just physical, it was digital. Computer files reverted to earlier versions. Emails sent the day before vanished. Surveillance footage from November 7th was gone, replaced with older loops. Timestamps confirmed a precise overwrite, 3:17 a.m., across every system. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a physicist from the University of Iowa, investigated and concluded something unsettling. Cedar Falls hadn't experienced a power outage or natural disaster. It had undergone a full rollback, as if the town had been restored from a save point. The reset's limits were exact. A highway construction site that spanned the Cedar Falls border with nearby Waterloo was only partially affected. On the Cedar Falls side, it reverted. On the Waterloo side, it remained in progress. The cutoff was surgical, a perfect line through concrete and earth. And then, quietly, reports emerged from other towns across the Midwest. Always small, always at 3:17 a.m., always one day reversed. What if time isn't linear, but version-controlled? Not a river, but a timeline with checkpoints, where reality can be restored to an earlier state, like a corrupted file. The Cedar Falls reset wasn't just an anomaly, it was maintenance, a rollback, a quiet undo of existence itself. In software, when something breaks, you revert to the last stable version. What if the same is true for towns, for people? And if reality has a restore function, who's deciding when to use it? Bakersfield, California, April 22, 2008. It started with a flicker. Outside the Kern County Museum, Maria Santos noticed something strange. The building's brick facade shimmered. Not like light or heat distortion, but like a digital projection losing resolution. Then, for a moment, it vanished, replaced by a transparent geometric outline glowing faintly. Within the hour, a 4-block radius of downtown Bakersfield looked like a 3D modeling program. Not a city. Walls became grids. Buildings turned skeletal, displayed as intersecting planes and wireframe shapes. Cars appeared as mesh diagrams. Even people flickered, momentarily revealing circulatory systems and bones as glowing lattices. Photographer Alex Chen, who happened to be nearby, captured dozens of images. His photos show storefronts as transparent boxes, their windows reduced to rectangular blueprints. But this wasn't an illusion. People still walked into buildings, through walls that now appeared semi-invisible. Cars still drove through intersections, even though they looked like untextured models. Physics remained intact. But the appearance of the world was glitching. Dr. Robert Kim, a graphics expert from UC Berkeley, studied the footage. His conclusion? The visual transformations followed the same conventions used in 3D software development: organized layers, structural wireframes, basic primitives. They were not random distortions. They followed an intentional logic, as if reality was exposing its underlying code. More disturbing were the hidden structures that became visible. Buildings revealed internal frameworks and support beams that didn't match any blueprints. Human figures glitched into patterns that included non-standard anatomical details, strange networks, foreign systems, parts that biology couldn't explain. The effect lasted 47 minutes. At exactly 3:17 p.m., reality snapped back. Instantaneously. One moment, wireframe city. The next, fully rendered Bakersfield. Witnesses compared it to a computer graphics processor catching up with a delayed frame, like the world had been temporarily paused, then resumed in high fidelity. Government reports cited electromagnetic interference and dismissed the event, but hundreds of eyewitnesses and irrefutable photographic evidence say otherwise. What is a city if it can be de-rendered? What is matter if it can be outlined and exposed like a model in design software? The rendering error of Bakersfield reveals a terrifying beauty, that what we see may only be a skin layered over code. We walk through geometry rendered in real time. Occasionally, the illusion slips, and for 47 minutes, one American city became a developer's preview, as if someone toggled show wireframe on the world. The deeper question isn't whether we live in a simulation. It's whether reality needs to render at all, or if we're just looking at the result of a system that usually works until it doesn't. Phoenix, Arizona, July 7, 2016. Inside the bustling Riverside shopping mall, lunchtime shoppers browsed, kids played, employees restocked shelves. Then, at 11:43 a.m., something strange happened. A flower display disappeared, not knocked over, not stolen, simply faded out, like a graphic element being deleted. Moments later, a row of mannequins blinked away. Then the tables. Then the food court. It wasn't chaos. It was orderly, precise. One by one, objects despawned in a logical sequence. Security guard Robert Martinez watched as benches, signage, and lighting fixtures dissolved into empty space. It was like watching someone delete furniture in a video game, he said. Things just faded, from the edges inward. Shoppers froze. Some screamed, others watched in awe, a few filmed. But the footage only deepened the mystery. Wherever something vanished, space closed behind it. Floor tiles restructured, store layouts adapted, walkways realigned themselves. It was as if the mall was self-correcting in real time, reorganizing its assets as if to preserve functionality. Most disturbing were the people. Some disappeared mid-stride, some mid-conversation. But no missing persons reports were ever filed, not because they returned, but because no one remembered them. Even those who had been with the vanished moments earlier felt as if something had been erased from their memory. As if the simulation didn't just delete people, it deleted the idea of them. Security footage showed obvious gaps. Scenes where individuals once stood now showed nothing at all, as though they had been edited out. Quantum physicist Dr. Angela Foster, who happened to be nearby, was called to observe. Her conclusion was chilling. The objects weren't disappearing randomly. They were being removed in data hierarchy order, starting with non-essentials: signage, decor, displays. Then larger structures, benches, partitions, then people. The pattern matched memory optimization protocols in digital systems. It was as if the mall, or the simulation containing it, was clearing unused assets to preserve resources. And once deleted, those items didn't leave debris or holes. The system adjusted its layout seamlessly, as if they had never been there. Even inventory systems updated in real time, reflecting that the missing merchandise had never existed. We think of reality as durable, objects existing until acted upon. But what if the world is more like a live rendered environment where only active elements are loaded? What if objects and people aren't permanent but conditional? The despawn event suggests we may live in a world that manages resources, like any optimized program, removing the forgotten, the unused, the idle. And if that's true, it raises an uncomfortable question. Are we active player or deletable assets? And when the system starts freeing memory, how do you make sure you don't vanish? Burlington, Vermont. March 3, 2019. College student Emma Rodriguez was sipping coffee downtown when she noticed something odd. The man across the street had checked his watch 3 times, in the exact same way, at the exact same spot. She watched longer. He looped his route. 12 minutes. Every time, the same pace, the same pause, the same glance at the time. Then she noticed a woman window shopping. Same stores, same words, same inflection. Then the old man feeding pigeons. Same breadcrumbs, same motion, same sequence. Something was wrong. The town was full of non-player characters. In the gaming world, NPCs, non-player characters, follow scripted behaviors. They repeat animations, speak canned dialogue, walk predetermined paths. They simulate life. And for 6 days, Burlington's residents became them. At least some did, about 200 individuals moving like clockwork. When approached, they responded with vague lines. "I'm just going about my normal day." "I don't know what you mean." Always with the same tone, the same rhythm, as if reading from a page. Behavioral psychologist Dr. Sarah Chen investigated the incident. What she found was disturbing. Surveillance showed the affected individuals never intersected paths, as if guided by invisible tracks. Their movements were smooth, efficient. Too perfect. No casual fidgeting, no hesitations, no spontaneous gestures. Even more eerie, their neural activity. EEGs revealed identical brain rhythms among all affected subjects. Not similar, identical. A signal pattern unseen in any natural state. It was as if consciousness had been overridden by a universal subroutine. On day 6, it stopped. All NPCs resumed normal behavior, confused, unaware of anything unusual. Memory scans revealed gaps. Interviews led nowhere. They had no idea what they'd done, but the patterns didn't disappear. Reports surfaced from other small towns, always college areas, always a similar percentage of the population, always 6 days, and always the same quiet horror. People reduced to background code. Who are we when we're not thinking? How much of our lives runs on autopilot? Routines we repeat, words we recycle, motions we barely notice. The NPC glitch wasn't just a town gone mechanical. It was a mirror held to us all. Are we always fully conscious, Or are we sometimes just following scripts, pre-written behaviors that activate under pressure, fatigue, distraction? And if consciousness can be turned off, even briefly, who or what is running the show? By now, the events are impossible to dismiss. A soldier teleported across the ocean. A town's gravity turned off like a switch. Time looped. People duplicated. Land masses floated. Walls were walked through. Cities reverted. Reality rendered in wireframe. Objects despawned. Humans ran on script. Each story stands alone, strange, eerie, self-contained. But together, they form a pattern, a language, a system. These aren't random anomalies. They share signatures, timing, symmetry, duration, structure. Each one behaves not like a ghost story or a supernatural event, but like a system error, a glitch. The teleportation of Gil Perez follows a perfect arc around the planet, geometrically clean. The gravity lapse in Taos formed a circular field, like a test zone in a simulation. The duplicate people appeared on a 24-hour delay, down to the second. The rendering error unfolded in concentric rings from a central origin, like a graphics card struggling to update a scene. The NPC glitch repeated behaviors in clean loops, with visible boundaries and predictable resets. These are not coincidences. They are debug patterns, just like in software, and there's more. Several of the events, the reset town, the rendering error, the despawn, ended at exact timestamps. Some at 3:17, some lasting 47 minutes, some always lasting 6 days, not approximate, precise. For decades, the idea that we live in a simulation was brushed off as science fiction. Then came the mathematicians, the physicists, the engineers. And they began to ask, what if it's not a joke? What if quantum indeterminacy isn't randomness, but a rendering limit? What if particles only decide their state when observed, because that's when the system loads them? What if memory isn't stored in the brain alone, but in space-time itself? And what if glitches aren't the exception, but the evidence? Taken together, the 10 glitches suggest a single insight. That reality behaves like a system, with logic, hierarchy, constraints, optimization. Like a game world where only what's needed is loaded, where unused assets are removed, where routines loop when no new data is provided. A world that is rendered on demand. A world with backups, with version control, with NPCs, with memory limits, and perhaps with users. If this is true, if reality is structured, not spontaneous, then every moment, every decision, every breath exists inside a framework. But this isn't a prison, it's a question. Who built the framework? Why does it have limits? What happens when we begin to notice the code beneath? And if glitches are the fingerprints of the architect, what are we supposed to do with them? Ignore them? Fear them? Or listen? In programming, a breakpoint is a pause, a deliberate stop in the flow of code to observe how a system behaves under pressure, to examine the state of memory, variables, logic, to find what's wrong or what's ready to change. Now consider this. What if our world has hit its breakpoint? What if these glitches, once rare and local, are becoming more frequent? Not just anomalies anymore, but symptoms. Reports have grown in number and scale. Duplications in Illinois, NPC behaviors in Vermont, towns reverting across the Midwest, wireframes in California, despawns in Arizona, different places, same durations, same patterns, same signature. And now, they're beginning to overlap. In 2022, a town in Oregon reported a rendering failure. At the same hour, a small village in France reported a memory reset. 2 separate locations, 2 identical timestamps. No apparent connection, except their architecture. Something is changing. The glitches are no longer just breakdowns. They're overloads, overwrites, tests, as if the system is pushing up against the edges of its own structure. Some believe we're seeing system maintenance, updates, recalibrations, backups failing and being restored. But others suggest something else. That the system isn't breaking, it's evolving, that these glitches are not signs of decay, but signs of expansion, like a computer pushing past a memory ceiling, like a game world loading a new level. Maybe consciousness itself is reaching a threshold where the old parameters no longer apply, and the system, or whatever runs beneath it, is adapting. And here's the most human part of the theory. The glitches only become visible when we're paying attention. The soldier in Manila didn't notice the flicker until he blinked. Jennifer Coomer only saw the loop because she began remembering. The Burlington NPCs went unnoticed until a bystander stepped off the path. What if attention isn't passive? What if it's interactive? What if consciousness is colliding with the limits of the simulation, forcing it to update, to adapt, to reveal? In other words, maybe we're not just passengers. Maybe we're part of the debugging process. We like to believe the world is finished, solid, final. But what if we are standing not in a complete universe, but a build in progress? A version still being tested, tweaked, refined. What if the bugs we see are not errors, but messages? A way for the system or its creator to say, "You're getting warmer. Keep going." Imagine for a moment that it's all true, that behind the sky is a screen, that behind time is a clock we didn't set, that behind every rule, gravity, memory, identity, there's a line of code we cannot see. Imagine that the universe is not infinite, but intelligent, not random, but written, not flawed, but under development. And now ask, where do we fit in? If we are part of a simulation, it does not reduce us. It reveals us. Because in every system there are variables, inputs, exceptions, patches. We may be more than code. We may be the curiosity within it, the subroutine that resists patterns, the element that questions its source. Every time we notice a glitch, every time we stop and ask, "Did that just happen?" we widen the crack, not to escape, but to see. Maybe that's our purpose, not to rewrite the program, but to witness it waking up. Think of what the glitches taught us. That space can jump, that time can reset, that people can be copied, that objects can despawn, that cities can flicker into wireframe. Each story was strange, but each one carried a message, that the world is not fixed, it is malleable. That perception is not passive, it is interactive. That reality may not be real, but our reaction to it is. The simulation hypothesis, at its core, is not about dystopia or paranoia. It's about wonder. It asks not who made the world, but what happens when the world starts showing its seams. It reminds us that to question everything, to lean into the mystery, is to participate in something greater. Because maybe the simulation isn't failing. Maybe it's inviting us to see beyond it. We don't know what lies at the end of this code. Maybe it's a programmer. Maybe it's a higher intelligence. Maybe it's a mirror. But this much is certain. In every glitch, we see not just a failure in the fabric of the world, but a spark in the fabric of ourselves. A reminder that the truest part of any simulation is the one that learns to ask why. So ask, wonder, notice, because the glitch may not be an error, it may be a message to you.